And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat. They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, and everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Flames land, not calm in hockey, and it's for sure just been a very interesting time in Calgary Flames land as we record this, as we are posting this live. The Flames are essentially, with a loss tonight against the Saturday night against the Los Angeles Kings, are eliminated from playoff contention. Mathematically, symbolically, literally, they are eliminated from the playoff competition, really, realistically, unless an unbelievable miracle happens. They are out, but that's okay. We are going to look ahead to what's going to happen. And welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Happy Easter long weekend for those who celebrate. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, and subscribe wherever you get your audio. Getting the Bat single in Calgary, or is it the Easter Bunny single, Dan Stevenson? What was it? Was it fair to say it was an Easter Bunny single this time?
I actually, when I looked up in the sky, I saw a silhouette of Harvey the Hound.
Oh, a Harvey the Hound symbol. It must have been Sean that would have put that out, because I would not have put out a Harvey the Hound symbol.
It looks like the Blasty one was broken, and so was the Scorch one. So you guys had to go with the third choice.
There we go. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy Easter, Kevin.
Happy Easter. We do need to start with some sad news before we begin. When, last time we talked on the Canucks podcast, we recognized and acknowledged the passing of Chris Simon. But really, this is really more, of course, of a Flames retrospective, because Chris Simon was a former Flame. He was part of the 2004 Stanley Cup run, but he passed away at the age of 52. In very unfortunate circumstances, which we won't necessarily delve into here. But of course, Chris Simon was drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers. He was part of the Eric Lindros trade and went to the Quebec Nordiques and was part of the Colorado Avalanche's Stanley Cup run. He was traded to the Flames in 2004 for Mika Kiprusoff's best friend, Jamie McLennan, Blair Betts, and Greg Moore, who is now a coach I believe, in women's university hockey. Signed with the Islanders in 2006, played with the Islanders, he also played 8 years with the Washington Capitals. He also played with the Chicago Blackhawks and the Minnesota Wild in the NHL, and then also went on to play until 2013. So he passes away at the age of 52. Flames did a nice tribute for him during the game last week against the Buffalo Sabres. You guys did a really good retrospective, Dan, on your podcast as well. But anything else that you would like to add in terms of Chris Simon?
I think it was weird. I remember in that 04 run, most teams have one enforcer, and the Flames had Christophe Oliwa. And to go out and get Chris Simon, I mean, let's be honest, he wasn't the best player, but to have him on the team, a known NHL name, which the Flames were short of that at that time, was pretty impressive.
He brought a Daryl Sutter element. Daryl Sutter was a GM at the time, and he loved those type of guys. He loved the Christophe Oliwas. He loved the peskiness of Ville Nieminen. He wanted that same, what turned, into more modern times, the Brian Brooks truculence. This was the truculence before truculence. That's the way that Daryl wanted to build that team, and it was successful at the time.
Well, when you look at what Daryl gave up for him too, that's kind of crazy. Like giving up, 3 players for essentially an enforcer and a 7th.
Yep. Yeah. That, yeah. And Blair Betts and Greg Moore did not turn out to play in the NHL that much. So, I mean, ultimately, probably a win trade for the Flames. But that's one of those risky ones where, one of those hits, it doesn't look good for the Flames at the end, right? But yeah, a sad ending for Chris Simon's career. He did end up actually playing in the KHL for a while. Actually spent his last 6 seasons with the KHL with Chekhov, Moscow, and Novoskik as well, where he finished his career in 2013. So he had a really lengthy career, a very sad, unfortunate circumstances. Thoughts with the Simon family during this very difficult time.
Thoughts with the Simon family and all of his friends, and I think it's again, we won't get into sort of why he died, but I think it's a good reminder that there's a reason that position has been phased out of the game.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a big reason why I think a lot of people were very concerned about what Matt Rempe was doing too.
Yep.
Just a couple of other quick notes here before we delve into what we're going to talk about, because we haven't been on for a couple of weeks here, but the Flames have made a couple of signings. One of them was the acquisition in the Elias Lindholm trade. Yoni Yormo was signed into an entry-level deal. This is a guy that I think is going to spend a good chunk of his career with the Calgary Wranglers, and that is okay because as you go forward with the Flames, even with good teams, you do need these guys that are kind of solid AHL kind of players that can, are a groundwork for your minor league team. And I know that, the object of this game is to obviously win the Stanley Cup, but you do need guys to play in the AHL. And you need like kind of those mentors for other players that are going to come up or down. Or come from Europe as an example and adjust to the game, which I think Yormo is going to have to do. So, and I think the other good thing about that, it just, from the Flames perspective, the fact that they've signed both Biskevich and Yormo, I think is a really good sign of how this Elias Lindholm trade has turned out for the Flames. Are both of these guys going to be spectacular players for the Flames? Yormo, no. Biskevich, I think the jury is still out, but that's a good start. That because I think ultimately the decision on this trade is going to go on the Flames' perspective. Down the road, we're going to see the results, but it's at least a good start for the Flames.
Yeah, I think it is too. And like you mentioned, Yormo, I think will be in the AHL for a couple seasons. There's no rush to bring him up. I don't know that he's number 1 or 2 on that depth chart, and he's going to be a guy that I think needs some time to adjust to the North American game, ice size, that sort of thing. But you know what? You need guys that can play professional hockey at both the NHL and AHL level. And we know the Flames have been prioritizing the Wranglers and trying to make sure they're a good team. And so even if Yormo can make a good living in the American League, I still think it could be a good trade there because you need guys that are comfortable in the American League to help develop your young guys that you want to propel to the NHL. So if Yormo doesn't make the NHL but can be a good, solid defenseman, maybe we pair up with another guy that we draft down the road and he becomes sort of that, great partner to bring out the best in somebody else. I think the Flames still get an excellent pickup there. For the cost of acquisition, you can't go wrong.
No. And the other one that they signed is a Sam Morton, and he is, of course, was the CHL Player of the Year. He was a Hobey Baker finalist. He's not going to win. 34 points in 37 games this year. He's from Lafayette, Colorado. He played with the helped Minnesota State reach the semifinals of the Mason Cup.
And not just played with, he was their captain.
Yes. And now he's the number 1 center on the Wranglers. He's got 3 points so far. He's looked really good. I don't know if we see him in the NHL on a regular basis, but again, I like this signing. This is one of those things we'll dig into a little bit more here, but this is kind of found money. Could this guy be an NHL player? Maybe, but this is a guy that's probably the best way that I would compare him to, like, if I look at this for the Canucks, is an Arshdeep Bains, Right now, he could be an in-between type of guy that spends some time with the Flames, but probably spending a little bit more time with the Wranglers, and adds to, I think, a big weakness with this Flames organization when you look at it top to bottom, the lack of skill, especially down the center ice position, under the age of 30. So I really do like that they signed this guy. Where he plays going forward will be interesting, but I do like that they added this.
Yeah, I think I look at him like a Josh Juris or Walker Dewar or some of those other guys they've signed, as free agents that have come in and had moderate levels of success. Do I think he might get a look at the NHL? Maybe. Do I think he'll be a full-time NHLer? No. I think, again, a great signing for the American League. I think a guy that, whether with Calgary or other teams, will probably bounce around the American League for a good portion of his career. I think coming to Calgary right now, like you said, short center depth, and also a team that is trying to prioritize young players. I think it's a good opportunity for him if he's looking for that. But a guy that I think, again, can be that great American League player and stay in your organization and fill that role. He's looked good already. He's wearing number 45. He's integrated well to the American League level. And we'll see if he can take another step from there.
Yeah. Might be interesting to see him play with Matt Coronado in the playoffs when the Wranglers.
Well, I mean, you could theoretically put him between Coronado and Peltier.
Yep. You really could. Yeah. So that is what is going on with the Flames in terms of the news of the week here in terms of signing and stuff. Just by the way, as we're doing this here, Dan, the Flames put out their lines for today, a morning skate, just so we know. Backlund, Huberdeau, Coleman, Kadri, Kuzmenko, Pospisil, Sharangovich, Zeri, Coronado, Rooney, Greer, and Hunt. The interesting thing is the pairings here. Rasmus Andersson with Joel Hanley, Mackenzie Weegar with Daniil Miromanov, and Oliver Shillington with Blair Paschal, and Jacob Markstrom getting the call in goal here for the Flames. I know that probably there's a lot of people will get into this, want to hear a little bit more of Dustin Wolf. I think a couple things here just in terms of defense, which I've actually kind of liked Joel Hanley, to be honest with you. I think he's been showing a really steady presence. And as far as Oliver Shillington goes, I'm higher on Oliver Shillington than you are. But I also don't know if, considering everything that he's been through, I don't know right now if he's ready to play 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, let's say that on Oliver Shillington, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, if you remember, this was a defenseman that for a couple of years we thought was, seventh defense at best. Let's get him off this team. And then he had one good year, showed he could do it. Then he went away for a couple of years and he's come back. He's looked great since he's come back. But to me, the body of work isn't there for me to say one way or the other which way he's going to be. I hope he does well. I think kind of odd to me that he's still unsigned. I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or not. But I think he'll stick around here. I think Conroy likes him. I agree with you about 20 minutes a night, but I also question that about Hanley, Miromanov, all these guys. And I think, honestly, that's why they're breaking up the defensive pair this late in the season. So you get a guy who's experienced playing that much with a guy who's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go there because I've been kind of surprised that Daniil Miromanov has played a couple of games, has actually played more than Rasmus Andersson. Now, I grant that it's not 5-on-5. That is because of more power play time. But maybe this. I'll ask it this way. The guy called in to ask Pat about this. So I'll ask you, is this a compliment to Miromanov, or has this been an indictment to Rasmus Andersson?
I think playing him on the power play, and Miromanov's made it known since he came here, he used to be a forward. He got converted to defense later in his hockey, I'll say, upbringing. So I think the Flames are trying to leverage that. I think they're trying to put him out there in the power play to act as that very offensive defenseman. And I don't think it has anything to do with Raz. I think it's first off seeing what you've got in the new guy. I mean, you just signed this guy to a 2-year deal. Let's see what we got there. What can it hurt? I hate to say we're probably going to lose anyways. I think trying to see if he's got that. And I think it's also just we're down a man or two. You can't play Raz all the time.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing 20. Like, I'm not saying that Rasmus should be playing 30 minutes a night. Don't get me wrong. But I guess where I'm coming from a little bit is This power play has not been good this year. Rasmus was the quarterback for most of it, and the number one. And I think there's a lot of ways to dissect that. I'm not blaming that only on Rasmus. I think there's a number of reasons why that has been a problem. And I think Miromanov just brings a different sort of different look. And it hasn't hurt.
For where the Flames are in the season, I think you want to see what he can do. And maybe you make a change next year. Maybe you go with him on your number 2 unit.
You know, he kind of Miromanov reminds me of a little bit, just not as physical, but he has a bit of Nikita Zadorov in him, where I'm just like, there's times I'm like, I'm really not sure what this guy's going to do, but it kind of works out for him. He's got a long reach. He is good in the offensive zone. I still think he needs some work in the D zone. I feel like Mackenzie Weegar has kind of been overcompensating at times for him defensively, because I think Weegar's kind of has struggled a little bit just trying to figure that out. But there's definitely some raw something there with Miromanov. What it is, I think we're going to look forward to that again as we head into the end of this year and into next year. But for me on Rasmus, I think he's been good, but I do think he's taken a step back this year. Like, I thought last year he made a really close effort to being a solid number 1 defenseman in the National Hockey League. And I feel like this year he took a step back. And there's probably a number of different reasons for that, but he hasn't shot as much. Of course, the Flames kind of had a conversation about that, but he just hasn't been. I don't feel like he's been his Rasmus self. Like, he hasn't been like, I know there's some defensemen, like you look at a Joel Hanley or a Paschal or a Tanev or even a Hanifin, and you're like, well, you know what? It's great that they're quiet. That's good. I don't think that with Andersson, I like him quiet. I do need to see some sort of like physical something from him. And I don't think I've seen that as much this year. I feel like he's taken a bit of a step back.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And, I think every player has up years and down years. I don't think it means he's past his prime or anything like that. I think, Let's be honest, his whole team is on a down year, right? And I've always got the sense that Raz sort of feeds off the energy of the guys on the ice from him and how well they're doing. And when the team's hot, he tends to be hot. When the team's not hot, he tends not to be hot. And I think this is a down year for Raz. I agree with you, and I know what you're saying. I think new changes, new coaching, new personnel, I think there's a lot going on there. And I'm hoping that Raz, I still think Raz is a 1-2 for this team. And I'm hoping that we'll see some of that again next year.
I do too. Now, you're not trading, just hopefully you're on my side, or we may have a debate. I'm not trading Rasmus Andersson. He's not a guy I'm looking to trade. Unless you're offering me a Makar Kale or a Matthews Austin or one of those guys, I'll consider
someone will pay for your new rink.
Yeah. But I'm not trading him for. I'm not looking to actively shop Rasmus Andersson. You can call him Rasmus Andersson, but you better have a damn good offer for Rasmus Andersson, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think the Flames. Conroy's made it known he still wants to be competitive. He still wants to win, and I think you need Rasmus Andersson to do that. If you've got, essentially a law firm name of, Weegar and Company, just Weegar and a bunch of random defensemen who, are playing here, you're not going to win anything. You need at least a top pair.
Yeah, I do agree.
And I don't think Shillington's a top pair guy yet.
No, you're gonna when I suspect what's going to happen with Shillington is we'll hear that signing probably closer either to the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if they release the Masterton nominees and it's Oliver Shillington gets the Masterton nominee and gets a contract extension. It's probably announced in there, or during the end of season presser, Conroy announces it there. But I would suspect that Shillington's going to be signed. But you're right, he's not. I kind of look at him as like Brett Kulak. He's kind of in that 4, 5, 6 role, but he's a great skater, which I think really helps. He's good with the puck, but is he an elite defenseman? No. Is he a solid defenseman? That realistically, in a couple of years, if the Flames need to make a trade of a defenseman, you could look at getting something for Oliver Shillington as a trade deadline depth piece for a contender if they are not in that position.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think he'll definitely be here. I just don't think it's. I don't think that there's a lot of demand for him right now on the trade market. I don't think you go and try to move him. I think you'll definitely see him stick around. And you were mentioning Masterton. Remember, the Flames have their own internal awards too, like the Clayton Riddell Award for the club's top defender, the Harley Hotchkiss Award for most valuable player, the Ralph and Sonia Scurfield Awards for off-ice contributions, and the J.R. Bud McCraig Award for embodying respect, courtesy, and compassion. So I could also see, one of those going to Shillington, and that being the renewal as well.
Yeah. Something in there. Yeah.
I think he'll be back. I think, and I mean, we can have this discussion if you want to. I've had it with Matt. I don't know, and I bet the holdup is, what's this guy worth? We just paid him $2.5 million for 2 years to not play hockey. Do we give him a raise? Do we sort of make him take a discount and pay us back in a way? I don't know what this guy's worth, and who's a comparable.
Yeah, that's it. Those are good questions.
I think that if the agent's coming out asking for a lot of money, you're going to say, well, who's a comparable? Yeah, he's younger. Yeah, he hasn't played in 2 years. Maybe he's got some more miles on him. I don't know what a new contract for Shillington looks like.
Yeah, and I think the other disadvantage that Shillington is running into is he doesn't have a playoff run behind him, a playoff run this year to prove his worth, where a Chris Tanev is going to get a raise or even a Noah Hannafin will get paid because of that, and I'm not putting Shillington in a Tanev-Hannafin camp, but just to bring the point of like what playoffs will do to someone, they do raise the price. And we've seen that with goalies or with defensemen and forwards over time. So he doesn't have that advantage. I mean,
if I'm the Flames, I'm probably saying, let's do the same money you have now for 2 years and show us you can, stay healthy and play those 2 years, and then we'll talk.
Yeah. The only other holdout possibility that I could see Oliver Shillington doing is saying, okay, I'll go to the Worlds and prove myself there. But I still don't know that gets him over $2 million.
No, I don't think it does. I mean, go to the World to get some more experience, but I'm not going to pay a lot of money because you won a tournament of all guys that aren't in the playoffs.
Yeah.
If you did a great job at the Olympics, it might be different. But, we're saying he doesn't have playoff experience, saying I won a tournament of also guys who aren't in the playoffs. I don't know that really makes you a lot more money.
No, we've seen it. It does help players' games. We've seen that with Andre Mangiapane, so it could help Oliver Shillington too in terms of that. But yeah, I don't think he gets.
I still think that I guess kind of the elephant in the room there with Shillington is, can he stay healthy? And that's why I wouldn't be, as the Flames, probably giving him a big raise yet until I know he can play a full season.
Yeah, and I guess the other part, like, I mean, I don't want to talk about his mental health status, but one thing I would want, to me, I'm just going to talk about this from my perspective. There are people in my life that I just do better around than others. It's just, and I think you're the same way. Everybody is. There's people that just bring the best out of you and not. And I think maybe one of the questions will be, depending on how the offseason looks for the Flames and who's there or not, what is that going to look like for Oliver Shillington? Because I suspect that there's some players that he's really close with, and there's some players that he may not be. That may factor into some things as well.
It might, but I also think that there's going to be a loyalty factor there too, that the Flames essentially gave me the leash I needed to get better. Even, Conroy has had nothing but good things to say about this kid. I don't know that other GMs are going to take the same chance on him.
No. And I don't know if he'll get this. I mean, I'm not raising the pedestal for the Flames here over everyone else in terms of an organization, but they kind of know what Oliver Shillington has been through. Or another organization doesn't necessarily. I mean, they'll have to do their legwork, and I'm sure that they will, but they are not necessarily going to know Oliver Shillington as well as the Flames would.
Yeah.
So the Flames are in a good position here, but I would just I think Oliver.
I think if you're Shillington, you take whatever the nice man offers you, and play another couple of years and see if he can do it.
Yeah. And he's going to be in a position here with the Flames for the next couple of years that he's going to be able to prove himself anyway.
And that's what I was just going to say. I think more than any other team that might take that flyer on him, I think the Flames are going to put him in a better position. I think he'll be in a 3-4 position for the Flames, because really you've got Weegar, you've got Andersson, you've got Shillington, and you've got Miromanov. and Hanley. I mean, there's your 5. If you look at Hanley as a 5.
I think Paschal should be in the discussion too. I actually would put Paschal ahead of Hanley.
Okay, yeah. So, but I mean, those are your 6 guys that you've got signed for next year, right? So, of those, I think they're going to give Shillington a 3-4 role. I don't know any other team that would do that.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think anywhere else he goes, he's a 6, maybe a 7.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think you could have the Troy Stetcher career. Spend your first 4 or 5 months in Arizona and get traded to Western Canada. Go back to Arizona, and then get traded again because you're out of playoffs.
The Arizona hokey pokey.
Yeah, and turn yourself around because that's what it's all about.
Troy Stetcher in, put Troy Stetcher out. Take Troy Stetcher in, turn them all about.
Yeah. Let's talk about Connor Zary. Do you think he's going to be, speaking of the world, do you think he's a guy that makes the World Hockey Championships? Would you be surprised if he's there?
If he's healthy, I wouldn't be. I mean, we've seen him out. I don't know what his health status is, if he's playing through something or not, but I would, if I was the GM, I'd seriously look at bringing him in. I don't think he's a big part of the team, but I think you bring him in.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's not a top. I mean, it's going to be
he's your probably 3rd, 4th line guy on that team.
Yeah, but still some good experience if he gets there. I mean, he's probably going to be hanging out, rubbing shoulders with Sidney Crosby. That's not a bad thing. Connor Bedard, not a bad thing either. I think he's come a long way. I think he's had a really good year. Up and down, which is not surprising for a guy that, he's a rookie, that you get ups and downs. But I think he's a guy that has certainly brought an offensive spark to a team that has certainly lacked an offensive spark for most of this year. Do you see him playing center down the stretch here?
Played center in junior. They've had him playing left wing most of his career in the AHL. I think that they need a center. I could see him being tried at center, but I think they're very comfortable with him at wing. So, yeah, I could see them maybe trying it out, but I don't expect them to just go full bore and convert this guy.
No.
It's always nice to know you've got that extra centerman. That okay, somebody gets hurt, we slide him over, that sort of thing. I could see them trying it, but I don't think it'd be more than a game or 2 experiment.
I think if they can get him there, I think it will be a good thing, because I do think center is I think they spent a lot of time working on defense. I think they're okay at goal. I'm not criticizing Dustin Wolf when I say that, but I think they have at least an NHLer at goal. I think that's fair to say. They have some good depth on defense. I think the next step that is worked on in terms of position here, it has to be center and getting some elite talent. If they can get Connor Zary at center, I think that's great. If not, I think it's fine that he's at the wing, and I think he'll be a really solid NHLer down the.
I think Connor Zary slots higher in the lineup on wing than he does at center.
Yeah, he doesn't pass back under Kadri to me.
Well, that's it. So he's your number 3 center, and he's been let's call him a number 2 winger all year. I think that's one of the reasons they want to keep him at wing too.
Yeah, and I mean, you got Sharon Govich as well, and he's got you can pin him in a spot of center. So you're kind of probably okay at center for next year in terms of you've got bodies there. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, and the Flames have money, and I mean, Craig Conroy hinted at it too. I could see them easily going out on the free agent market and bringing in a late 20s, early 30s guy to be your number 3 center.
Yep. Yeah.
Or, I mean, we've talked about them taking garbage money too. There's a lot of big money centers, who I could see them bringing in and charging somebody almost the reverse of the Monahan deal, right? Charge somebody a draft pick to bring in their $5-6 million center.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. You were talking about that at the podcast. I could see them doing that. Kind of doing what the Senators did with Tarasenko, except if you're going to trade this guy, you better figure out, if you have to trade him, that he's going to more than one city. And that whole issue with that Tarasenko. I mean, that's not Steve Staios' fault necessarily. That was Pierre Dorian's fault, but still, point being made.
Yeah, I think for Flames fans, the best analogy would be the Monahan deal in reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we'll get to Sean Monahan in a moment, in a few moments here. But yeah, I think there. I don't mind their defense. I think that needs work right now. I don't.
I think the whole team needs work. That's why the Flames are in a playoff spot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess, yeah.
And like you mentioned Sharon Govich at center. I don't know if the long-term play is to have Sharon Govich at center either. I mean, this is sort of like, remember the first couple of years of Elias Lindholm? He was sometimes on the right, sometimes on center. I think they're putting him there because he's what they've got. But I think there needs to be a good long look in the offseason of, is this guy a centerman? I don't know that he's the best center option.
It depends how, I guess, okay, where do you see Kuzmenko back next year?
Yes.
And I guess where are you playing Kuzmenko? You probably have got him with Huberdeau in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be, lining up to take Kuzmenko in the offseason from the Flames for $5 million.
No.
He hasn't looked great since he came to the Flames. That's not a guy. You'd have to pay somebody, I think, to take him. And the Flames have the money. You might as well just run with him.
Yeah. Can I just touch on that for a second? Glad you brought that up because I keep seeing every time Kuzmenko scores goals, there are these stats out that Kuzmenko has more goals than Lindholm. Okay, great. But let's be honest, he has not been consistent with the Flames. There has been times that I would argue that Matt Coronado has looked better than Andrei Kuzmenko when Coronado has been in the lineup. He's not been consistent. That is an issue that I think plagued him in Vancouver and is plaguing him in Calgary. There's no question about the talent, Dan. I don't think that anybody will argue that, but it's not been consistent, and that has to happen in the offseason. They need him to be a lot more consistent.
They either need him to be consistent or they need to be willing to play him down the lineup where consistency doesn't matter as much. If he's a third line winger, you can get away with less minutes and probably less need to be on every night because you're less important to the team's outcome.
Well, but then that becomes the problem because if you're in a situation like let's toss the Buffalo game in as an example here. It's 1-1. You need a goal. Your best goal scorer, guy that can put the puck in the net in terms of pure talent, is Andrei Kuzmenko. But you cannot trust him at that point because you don't know what you're going to get from him. That is where that becomes a bit of a problem, right?
Yep.
You need to have him be a consistent. Look, I don't think even Rick Tocchet was not asking this guy to win the Frank J. Selke Award for best defensive forward, but he was asking him to play a more detailed game. And it was a struggle for Kuzmenko to get there. And I'm seeing it be a struggle for him now. He's a lovable human being with hair and all of that. He's an amazing personality. Dan,
I get a t-shirt that says that. I'm a lovable human being with hair.
Yeah.
And Kev, I think the Flames are thankfully in a spot where I think they need Kuzmenko for what he does off the ice for the team, and I think they're going to be in a spot next year, cap wise and roster wise, if they need to sit him in the press box.
Yep.
Right. It's not ideal. I don't want to pay somebody to take Kuzmenko off their hands at this point. I think that is a really terrible asset management move. They've got the cap room. They've probably got the roster room. Even if you end up relegating him to your number 13 forward until he can become more, until he can become more consistent, nobody's expecting this guy to be the next Michael Stone where you don't play him for 9 months and he still looks like he played yesterday. But you're right.
Daryl's farm.
What's that?
Put him on Daryl's farm.
There you go.
He did with Michael Stone.
And I think that you're right. Consistency is an issue there. But if he were playing fourth line minutes, and like you said, he's the best pure scorer, I think you've got to change your lineup so that's not the case. You don't have to rely on him if he's not able to be relied on. Like that's let's be honest, that's a failure of some of the pieces on this team. And we know that. A guy like Huberdeau should be in that role. He's not either. That's why the Flames are where they are. But I think you keep Kuzmenko next year and you either work through it with him or you let him walk. And I think that severely affects his future in the National Hockey League. Next year's a contract year too. We know guys sometimes magically figure out how to play hockey when it's contract year.
Yeah, Johnny Gaudreau. Not that Johnny Gaudreau is bad, but he really figured it out that year, right? So,
and I think if you're Kuzmenko and you're looking at this going, wow, I'm getting paid $5 million. I'm not consistent. I need to figure this out if I want to make any money in the National Hockey League. Because I think if he doesn't, somebody will take a shot at him at $2 million.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the same knock on Rajicka, right? And the Flames gave Rajicka a lot of leash.
Yes, they did. Probably too much, ultimately.
And I don't see why they wouldn't with Kuzmenko. There's no reason not to at this point with the roster makeup.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about the salary or, giving away stuff to get rid of someone. I think, one of the best things that Craig Conroy ultimately, to go back to the Markstrom, New Jersey thing, that was another, I think that this is going to ultimately turn out to be a much better move that they didn't do it, because not retaining salary on Markstrom, I think, was on any of these players other than, they did with Tanev, or Tanev and Hanifin, but
remember that those they only retain till the end of the year.
Yeah,
that,
with
to me, it's a big difference, right? As soon as July 1st comes, you're off the hook for those. You're not retaining those two guys for 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
They can afford to retain for the year. Why not?
Yeah.
It's not like they needed that money.
No.
But they don't want to be handcuffed in the future.
Yeah, and that was why that was a smart move in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so
going back to Markstrom, I still think that there's going to be a market in the offseason for some team that's in the playoffs, craps out early, realized we didn't have the goaltending we think we did, and Markstrom gets the call. Now, there's also talk in Boston that Ullmark might be on the block as well. So I think that there could be – Markstrom maybe isn't the only choice like we thought that he might be, but I still think you can get a high value for him, and I think there will be 3 or 4 teams competing for 2 goaltenders in the offseason.
But you know what? The one thing I would say to that, Ullmark has a no trade list as well, which I think is going to hamper what Boston's going to be able to do with Ullmark as much as the Flames would have with Markstrom. And the one thing to remember with Ullmark is he's been basically splitting time with Swayman this year. And yes, he won the Vezina last year, but he does need a really good playoff run, I think, to increase that value. Markstrom has already got value. Even at 34, he's had a really good year. I think there was a lot of people that thought before the collapse that he was in the Vezina Trophy conversation.
I'll be honest, I think that Ullmark looks better than he is because he's playing in Boston.
Yeah, I think I could. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm necessarily there yet, but I don't hate your argument there.
If I'm a GM at this point and I'm looking to make a quick run to the cup, I think it's going to make more sense to acquire a 34-year-old who I know what they've got than a 30-year-old who's a 1A, 1B guy, and I don't quite know. I also think that Markstrom is going to be easier to move because I think that no trade list with, let's be honest, 2-3 years left in the NHL probably is going to be anyone who's a contender.
And I think Mark, yeah.
Or I think if you're 30, like Ullmark, you're going to want, there's going to be a lot of other things. You might be there for 5-6 years. You really want to think about that city.
Yeah. And I would argue, and I know that people, there's another team that has entered this Markstrom chat that I would like, just, depending on how things go. And Chris Tanev was traded to Dallas, and Jake Ottinger has not had a great year. If they don't get past the first round, I wonder if they take a little bit of. I wonder if they look at Markstrom.
I've said all year. I think a logical landing spot for Markstrom would be LA. They were a team that was looking good. They crapped the bed. They fired their coach. They don't. I mean, let's be honest. Talbot is not a starter for a playoff team right now.
Yeah, they play such a low level. This is not a promotion for the game tonight, by the way. They play such a low-level event type of hockey that, if they play that way, Talbot can look better. But if it gets into a high end, if they're playing the Oilers in the first round, I think Talbot's going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah, David Riddick, we've proven, is not a playoff starter. So I think I could see LA making a big swing for one of those two guys.
Yeah.
Because they were a team that was doing really well at the beginning of the season. And I personally think a big reason for their fall is their goaltending.
And they have trouble, but they also have trouble. They have trouble scoring too. Yeah, it's on both ends of that.
Scoring, I think, is going to be easier for them to address.
Yeah, in the offseason that you can do, but goaltending, yeah, if you can get a guy that can play 50 to 55 games, you wonder if they, there's going to be a lot of teams that I think are still going to be in a Markstrom. So I don't think that they had to make this New Jersey trade. Yeah. And, I think there's players out there.
An underdog, I could see that no one's talking about. I could see the Islanders making a swing for either Markstrom or Allmark. Again, I mean, they're a team that needs two goalies. They've got Varlamov. I don't know if Varlamov's turned out the way they wanted him to. And I think they're a team that thinks they're ready to make a swing.
I think there's going to be some massive changes on the island next year, too.
I agree.
Yeah. Here's the other underdog team is Detroit.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So I also think that if it's the Islanders, they're going to have to move Varlamov or Sorokin. So if you're Calgary and you get Sorokin back as part of that deal, I'd be okay with that too.
Yeah. Now, you guys talked about this on the podcast, so I wanted to kind of add something.
Detroit is a great example too, though. Like before we move away from them, I did not know James Reimer still existed in the National Hockey League, but there he is, plugging away on Detroit. They need some goalie help for sure.
Yeah. Oh, side note, that Eastern Turtle race. Oh my gosh. Anyway, the Flames are in the East. They'd be competing for a playoff spot. You kind of look at it as just wow.
I think you were gonna probably go to the Dan Vladar scenario.
Yeah. So that's the other news. Vladar's at the end of the year, out for the year with the hip surgery. You guys talked about this on the podcast, and you asked if you could see him playing with the Wranglers. I think it's possible that he might be on LTIR to start next year. And you're right. You're not getting anything for him. And I even think at his healthiest, Dan, you are not getting much for Dan Vladar.
I think if he was healthy, you'd get a mid-round pick because there's somebody who wants to upgrade their backup. I mean, look at, again, a team like Detroit would probably rather him than Reimer. So I think they'd give you a third for him, but maybe a fourth. But coming off of, a hip surgery as a backup, you don't know what this guy is.
Yeah, no. And with Markstrom being traded,
there's waivers, I think, for that reason. Because remember, the thing people forget with waivers is if you bring them in, you've got to keep them in the NHL, and if not, they're optioned back to the original team. Nobody's going to want to keep them in the NHL.
No, not with hip surgery.
Unless you're willing to run a 3-goalie setup, because I don't think anyone's going to be ready to say, okay, he's our backup. We don't know what we got there.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the 3-goalie setup at all. I think it's hard to get everybody the necessary practice time that is needed.
I agree.
But I could see the Flames. I still think you put Vladar on LTIR, which I think is a possibility as well. And they go and find that veteran, talk about a guy that may here. I'll toss a name out at you just to hear me out here. I'll quite likely buyout is Jack Campbell with the Oilers. They're going to run with Stuart Skinner. They didn't call Jack Campbell up for the playoffs. Very clearly, that's a buyout. What about him as an option for the Flames next year? As a potential backup 1B Wolf, a guy that needs to prove it.
I think Wolf needs a veteran partner, whether that's Markstrom or somebody else. You don't want to run Wolf and, a guy that's not a known commodity. I think that Campbell needs to prove himself. Again, I could see almost like the Oscar Dance deal, take him in the AHL and let him prove himself there. I don't know that he's the guy that I'd be jumping at as a backup to Wolf because I don't know that he's shown what he has, what it takes. And if Wolf gets into a jam, are they any better with him in net?
Well, the one reason I thought of Campbell is because he is going to have to prove something, right? And you probably can get him really cheap. You could probably get him you probably toss a couple million at him.
Yeah, I don't know. I would rather somebody else, like a San Jose or someone we know is going to be bad, take him and see what he's got there and then go after him the next year.
Yeah.
Campbell, I'd probably take a deal for a bottom team for 1 year, maybe 2 years. Say, hey, I'm going to, take $2 million. I'll come in, I'll play. and then I can make some more money after that.
Yeah. Now, I guess the other name I will toss out at you that came to mind when you guys had that conversation is Jake Allen, who's playing in New Jersey now. He's not a number one goalie, but he's a guy that can probably spot you at least 20 to 30 pretty solid games. That might be a guy I would be open to coming to the Flames. I don't know how that works in terms of
I think Allen would be fine. If you think the Wolf can play the majority of the minutes, I think that Allen is fine. If you're looking for a 1A, 1B, I'm not sure that Allen's your guy, but if you're looking at Wolf to play starter minutes, I think, that would work fine.
Yeah. What has Wolf proven to you so far?
I think there was some unrealistic expectations on Wolf. I thought people thought he'd be the second coming to Kiprusoff. To me, he's had good games, had bad games. Show me a National Hockey League goaltender that doesn't. Show me a guy who looks fantastic every night. I think Wolf has shown he can play in the NHL level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's been times he's been able to show some swagger and confidence, and his movement has been a lot more quiet. The one thing I would say is when he allows a goal he doesn't like, it kind of throws him off of his game right now. And
that's a young goalie thing.
That's totally a young goalie thing, right?
What I think is more telling, Kevin, is we've seen Wolf now get to play 2 or 3 games in a row at the NHL level, which we haven't before. And when he has a bad game, it doesn't seem like it throws him off for the next game.
No.
And I think that's important if you're looking at a starter.
He's got a really good mentality. Like, he really does. And I do think he's an NHL goalie. Is he an elite? It's going to take a while for him to get to that elite NHL goalie standard yet, but it's a good
if we're looking at potential backups there, I'm just looking at the list of even free agent goalies. I don't know who New Jersey wants to move forward with, but if Kaapo Kähkönen is available, I think I think he could be a guy to look at. Casey DeSmith, if he doesn't get re-signed, I think could be that 1B guy. I think there's a number of guys that'll be available as UFAs. I mean, even a guy like Matt Murray, I don't know if they want to move forward with him. He's expensive, but he's proven.
He's also injury prone.
Yeah, but if he's playing backup minutes, I don't know if that's as worrisome.
The significance of that injury worries me, though.
The Flames, just like we were talking about with Shillington and with Vladar, you'd have to do your homework on the injury, right? You'd have to get your people to look at him. But if you think he can do, 25 games, maybe. Phoenix Copley's another interesting name on there. Even a guy like Antti Raanta, he's going to be 36, but if you just need him to spot you 20 games, I think he could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a good backup market. So you're doing okay. I mean, I guess the question is, going into the season, what your expectations for Wolf is next year. Do you have him play? Do you expect 40-50? Do you expect 34? Like, where are you at? What are we getting from Wolf? I think that answer has to be before you get into, you're
and
obviously.
That's why I thought Wolf Vladar was an intriguing prospect, because either guy could take the starting role.
Yeah. And ideally, I would have, if it wasn't for the Vladar injury, I would have wanted to come into camp with them competing for the spot, because I think I've always seen competition is better. And it's not I hope people it's not that I'm not a Dustin Wolf fan. I just, I'm not. I think what we're both saying is we need to lower our expectations of players and just allow them to get comfortable into the game. And
I think it's dangerous when we just assume somebody's the next great. I know fans want stars, but if we say, "Oh, Dustin Wolf, he's the next great goalie," and we have big expectations, it's hard to live up to those. I think we just need to let guys go in and be who they're going to be and compete for that job, and take some of that pressure off. And I think if Wolf didn't have a good start to the season, and let's say Vladar did, great, give him that time to to find his groove.
Yeah.
A guy that we're not talking about here, I think if I'm Oscar Dansk, his contract's up at the end of the year. I think I definitely re-sign here. I think he's probably going to be the American League starter next year.
Yeah, he's the Wrangler starter next year.
And he's got a ton of time this year, because how often has Wolf been called up? More than he probably thought he would. Like, the Flames would give me that opportunity, I'd stick around.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see him getting an NHL job. The only possible place I could see that is Washington found Charlie Lindgren in a bargain bin at Walmart, and But maybe.
But again, I think looking at some of those names you're just talking about in the UFA market, I think Washington would either, probably go UFA shopping. I'm not sure that Dansk is the number one guy I'm looking at if I'm going for bargain bin shopping.
No, and yeah. Speaking of, let's go. You talked about expectations, and I sent out a tweet thread this week that rankled that some fans in Flames land liked, others didn't. And I talked about kind of the building around top 10 picks, because we're in a position. We know the Flames are not going to make the playoffs, and a lot of what I'm calling the influencers, or the people that are trying to be influencers on social media, are really encouraging this tankathon so the Flames can get a top 10 pick. And I just, yes, the Edmonton Oilers did draft Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in the top 10. They also drafted Neo Yakupov and Jesse Pujärvi in the top 10. The Vancouver Canucks have drafted Elias Pettersson when he's going good, and Quinn Hughes in the top 10. They also drafted Olli Juolevi and Jake Virtanen in the top 10. And yes, there are teams that hit like Colorado with Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, but they also had one draft in 2014 that they only had one player play in the NHL, and that was a guy by the name of I'll just pull this up here. A guy by the name of Anton Lindholm. Not sure if he's related to Elias, and he was a 5th round pick in 2014, 66 games. Now they didn't pick in the top 10 that year. They picked 23rd, and they got a Connor Bleakley. You also have the Buffalo Sabres, who have picked 10 straight years in the top 10, and they have some hits in Rasmus Dahlin. Then now they acquired Bowen Byram, which was a Colorado pick, but they've had to trade Jack Eichel to the Vegas Golden Knights. They've had to trade Sam Reinhart to the Buffalo Sabres. All I am saying is you cannot, with this top 10 pick, we agree the Flames need elite talent, but I think just having this expectation on this top 10 talent that's going to walk in here and be the savior of the franchise, especially with one particular name in that list, I think we need to pump the brakes on that. Let the guy, whoever it is, get comfortable in the league. Like look at the Flames' history. Matthew Tkachuk turned out to be an elite franchise guy, but it's fair to say, and Sam Bennett and Sean Monahan, they're solid NHLers. They're not franchise guys. So it is not a guarantee. My point ultimately is it is not a guarantee in the top 10 that you are going to get your franchise face of the franchise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think the Flames have been good at getting, picks later in the draft as well. I mean, even go back to 2011. Flames took Sven Baertschi at number 13. Marcus Granlund at 45. Tyler Wotherspoon at 57. Those were some lousy picks in that draft. So there's good and there's bad every year. And there's just as many good stories of guys drafted high as there are, like you said, busts. I mean, go back to 2005. Gilbert Brulé drafted number 6. Scott Glennie in 2009, number 8. Guys that you go, who? And I don't think that the Flames, the guys that do really well, those top 5 guys, are usually guys that come from the draft and come right to the NHL. And that's not, I think, even the Flames draft top 10, you're not going to have a guy come right to the NHL. So whether it's a top 10 pick, a top 20 pick, I think any of those guys, if you season them correctly in the AHL, you can work to get them where you need them to be. I think a lot of times those guys that, fans are excited about, those top picks, it's because, wow, they're coming to the NHL. And I think actually with Sam Bennett, the Flames messed it up by bringing him to the NHL too early.
Yep, they did.
I've said that since the beginning. I think he needed more American League time, but they were trying to bring him in. I think a lot of that's a PR thing. And I think if you give these guys, the Flames shown they have a good developmental system. Get the right guy and develop him correctly.
Yeah. Really good example of what we're seeing with right now. And I know there was some talk around Samuel Honzek and his performance this year, and he's been hurt for most of the year. So I think, in terms of his development, I think you need to give him a break on 2 levels. He's adjusting. And that injury is It's a pretty significant injury too. But let's not forget, Jaden Lipinski was a point-a-game player for the same Vancouver Giants, and he was a third-round pick. So, and this is where, for the Flames, that's where I think the hope comes from. Is they've been really good at mid-round picks for the last at least
fourth-round pick.
Johnny Gaudreau, exactly. I mean, Rasmus Andersson was a second-round pick in that Sven Berchi deal, not a first-round pick, but a second-round pick. You got.
And remember, in that draft, they actually gave away their top picks and still got Andersson and Shillington.
Yeah. And even in the Connor Zary draft, the Flames went down not once but twice to pick up Connor Zary. So, and then you got Matt Coronado a couple years ago, and I think people are excited about him as well. So the Flames drafting has been good. I'm not saying that it's not going to be. I just don't think that you need to. I just don't think you need to put the pressure on this guy, whoever is coming in at 18 years old, to be the savior of the franchise. I don't know if Maxim Celebrini is going to come away. I mean, I think a lot of people are really excited about him, but that's the guy that sounds to me like this is going to be the franchise guy. I think everyone else could be in the top 10 could be stars, but are they the franchise guy? I don't know if that's projected yet. But again,
I don't know that right now the Flames need a franchise guy. I mean, so you bring him in, who does he replace in the lineup? It's not like you're going to draft your 1C out of this draft. I think the Flames need to get some. And I think the other thing, Kevin, is we expect those number one picks to be that franchise guy. Always. That's what fans expect. That, they'll come in, they'll be the face of our franchise. You need guys playing the third line, the fourth line, the last pair, you need guys all up and down the lineup. And I think, Zary, do I think he will ever be a franchise player for the Flames? No. Do I think he can be a good heart and soul Flame for a long time? Yes. And I think that's more what the Flames need to find is those guys they can slot in the lineup. I think a guy like, and I hate to say him, but Dubé, Mangiapane, these guys that have been around for a while, move their way up the lineup. I think that's what you're looking for right now. It's just those young guys you can develop as this team develops.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, it would be great to not pick, is it good to pick higher in terms of you have a chance to get a good player? Sure, absolutely. That's the kind of the idea, but that's not always the guarantee.
And I don't think fans in Calgary want to commit to what it takes to getting one of those guys. I mean, you look at the top teams, they're not almost in the playoffs, and then they manage to, snag that guy. There's years of misery to get that. And I don't know the Flames fans are ready for the years of misery to bring in a Celebrini.
No, I actually don't think there is. I think that there's a loud section of the Flames fans that want that, but I don't think the majority of the fan base does. And I think
the fans want that on the ice, but I don't think that they want to go through everything that it actually requires.
Yeah. It would be interesting one day to get some Buffalo Sabre fans on a podcast and just talk about the misery of being out of the playoffs for now 13 consecutive seasons.
Yeah, well, I mean, even, up north, up until a couple of years ago, Edmonton was drafting high and crapping the bed every year.
Yep.
Right? And they finally, and I would still say they don't have a great team, but I think McDavid has, taken that team on his back. But, you look at a lot of those guys that have come in. Where are they now? What are they doing? I mean, even guys like Eberle, who is a high pick there and, gone on to still be okay, but not that franchise guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, the other side of this is the importance of drafting, scouting, developing. And you look at successful teams for the most part, they find those late round picks or they do really good trades right. And that's Craig Conroy is passionate about scouting. He's very passionate about scouting. I mean, he said that at the trade deadline press conference. I'm glad the trade deadline's over. I need to go do some scouting.
Well, that's his background with this organization.
Yeah. So I'm comforted by that part of it. I'm not saying like the Flames are in for a long pain, but I just don't think we need to put all this pressure on the top 10 guy to be this guy. Let the guy, whoever it is, play hockey and develop to whatever he becomes.
And I mean, going back to those teams that got that pick, I mean, Pittsburgh, they were almost ready to move that team. That's what I mean by some of the misery that goes along with this. Like if fans are willing to say, yes, we want to go through that. We're still going to buy tickets. We're still going to buy concession. We're going to support this team. Sure. But that's not the case. And we've been in that position as Flames fans of threatening to move this team already. We don't want that again. They need to be somewhat competitive. And, sure. I mean, Chicago's got Connor Bedard. They're still a terrible hockey team.
They are. Yes. Yes. And by the way, they won a game over San Jose when they were down 4-0 and still went through a bag skate. So even the
Kevin, what do you think about what the PWHL is doing in terms of their draft positioning? Are you familiar with their system?
Yeah. For those who don't, just refresh it.
Sure. So in the PWHL, the Women's League, once you're out of the playoffs, then they're actually playing for points. The teams that win the most points after they're mathematically eliminated gets the first overall pick. So it still makes you want to be competitive. This whole tanking thing, which I think is crap myself, goes away because after the deadline, you have to play for your draft position. Now, that would have some implications on the NHL. You wouldn't see bad teams trading away as many guys at the deadline. So I think, for all of that trade center and, all those things the fans want for a whole day event, it would be gone. You wouldn't get a lot of those huge trades made because your team still wants to be competitive. Everyone, I think, would keep more of their roster, but it would allow a team like the Flames who, they're close, or even last year, they're close to be playing for something. The downside to it is teams like San Jose and Chicago would never probably get that pick.
Honestly, Dan, I think what Eric Duhatschek suggested is one of my favorite things. Just give everyone from 1 to 16, or whatever you do in the future. If you expand the amount, whoever's in the out of the playoffs, put they all have the same odds, and whoever gets the first pick gets the first pick. Because the worst team isn't always getting the first pick anyway. No. I mean, you look at the New York Rangers. A couple years ago, they were basically part of the bubble play-in, and then they got the first pick. The New Jersey Devils, when they got their first pick, weren't the worst team. Last year, the Chicago Blackhawks, I think, were the third worst team and won the lottery. So, which with Columbus had the worst record. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to being worse gets you first. It is a lottery system, and I just think it closes this tanking window that people are talking about. That I'm with you. I think it's just complete nonsense. And it just allows, I think the other thing that people forget here is, you need to establish, even in tough times, one of the things that you have to establish is a standard of what is an acceptable way to play and not.
And that's one thing Conroy's already said is we expect wins here.
Yes. Yeah. And I just don't think that having a losing mindset gets you anywhere closer to winning, because it's just hard. It's hard enough to win hockey games. It's hard to win the cup, and it's just hard to change that, because a lot of that, it becomes confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Are you confident that you're going to hold on to that 3-2 lead with 5 minutes to go in the hockey game? That's one of the things that you have to learn. And even with the Vancouver Canucks, just to, I think one of the learning curves is learning how to win some of these tougher games that they've been struggling with. That's part of that growth process too. So I don't know.
I think there's going to have to be some changes made to the lottery if they expand. I don't know that this is sustainable. And one thing I'd like to see at some point is, hey, you've been in the top 3 for the last 3 years. You're not going to be in again. Like, I think there could be sort of you've had so many cracks at this. Now it's somebody else's turn.
Brian Burke brought that idea up. It's like you get 2 cracks at being in the top 3, and then if you're in the bottom, you're not in the top 3. You have to.
And I think that's fair too, especially as a league. If you're trying to spread the wealth and spread some of those guys around, so every market is successful, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and and it becomes more about
you've had the chance to get your marquee players. If you can't build around them, that's your fault. Next.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, you can't keep doing what Buffalo. I mean, you can't be a Buffalo. You can't be in Arizona. You can't and it's not healthy for hockey, and it's not healthy for the market.
No, and I mean, really, if you look at it, I think the NHL would rather some of these guys go to bigger markets, which I don't disagree with. But I think if every market had a marquee guy, it's going to be better for the game. So I think if the NHL were to spread that around and Chicago gets one guy, Calgary gets their guy. Like, I think if everybody had that chance to get that top marquee guy you could sell in that market, Arizona, some of these markets that are struggling, I think that's better for the game overall.
Yeah. Winning is the best cure, though.
It is.
Yeah. But look, we're not expecting the Flames to go on a lengthy winning streak here. We're not expecting the Flames to win every game. But I think, Dan, you and I would agree that losing every game is not acceptable either. So I think what is the standard that we should expect from the Flames? I think we all agree that it's probably, we're going to see a little bit more Matt Coronados. We're going to see a little bit more of some other guys that are going to give a little bit look. I think that's fair. And I think, sure, we agree, but there still needs to be a standard that the Flames need to play at. And that, I went back to the Chicago game. I thought it was generally a poor effort from the Flames. I didn't think they had a poor effort. You guys will recap that game, but I thought it was a generally pretty poor effort against the Blackhawks. Better effort against the St. Louis Blues. But what is the standard we should expect from the Flames as we go forward here?
I think based on what Conroy's told us, you expect these guys to play and put in the effort like they would any other game, like they would if they're still racing for the playoffs. You're looking for that effort. And Craig wants a winning environment here in Calgary, and these guys need to give him that. And I think you're going to start seeing it, honestly, Kevin, where if you're not giving the effort, you're not going to be playing, or you're not going to be playing as much.
We've already seen Huska kind of pull those strings already. He's done that with Kuzmenko. I mean, earlier this year, he benched Jonathan Huberdeau. He's benched Sharon Govich at times as well. He's not afraid to do it, and he will not be afraid to do it and he has to establish that standard for himself as he heads into next year. I mean, we're not seeing a coaching change here, and he has to establish that for himself as an inexperienced coach. He needs to establish that groundwork that he's going to have here. So I agree with you. I would not be surprised if there are benchings, if there was players not playing well, even at this late stage.
And I think you also have to start establishing what some of these guys are. What is Joel Hanley? Who is Daniil Miromanov? Are they number 4s, number 3s? So I think you're going to see some guys struggle because the Flames are going to push them to do more. Is Dryden Hunt an everyday NHLer? Is, Wolf ready to make that jump? I think there's going to be some guys that are going to be challenging here, and those guys need to be able to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and I want to see how these young players kind of put them in a bit more of a leadership role. Like, maybe I wouldn't be angry. I don't know how this would work in the dressing room. I wouldn't be upset if they threw an A on Martin Postoso for just one game to see what it's like to be the assistant captain and to know what that role actually takes on the ice. Just to, I mean, you've got your leadership group, but that younger group is going to have to start taking a leadership.
Well, and they have some, as far as I know, they still got some A's open because of some of the moves. So you could just rotate the A for the rest of the season.
Yeah. They have to start taking ownership and establishment in that room as to what this, because the Flames need to establish the identity of what they're going to be going forward. We're not expecting them to be a good team next year. They're probably going to be a team that's quite likely going to be picking in the top 10. So you don't need to cheer for them to be bad next year. They are going to be bad next year. You don't have to cheer for it. It's going to happen. I'm 95% certain that that's where they're going to be. I mean, I would be shocked if it's anything else. So you need to establish that going forward. So,
and I mean, we talked about Kuzmenko earlier. I think you've got to give Kuzmenko, a shot to do what he's good at. Maybe give him that top 6 time. But if he's looking bad that night, you got to be willing to quickly pull him back and put someone else in there.
Yeah. I know that people have disagreed with me, but I think I do want to see Kuzmenko with Backlund and Coleman, because Backlund and Coleman, to me, are the standard bearers of what to expect from a Flames game. They give an effort every night. I mean, I know that some people have been a little critical of Backlund's defensive play, which, it's fair. I'm not going to disagree with that, but they are generally the guys that have put in the yeoman's work, and they're the harder working guys. And I think putting Kuzmenko with Backlund and Coleman, I think would help Kuzmenko immensely. We
all saw Kuzmenko looking really good with Huberdeau when he first came in.
Yeah, they do have a chemistry.
So I could even see doing Huberdeau, Kuzmenko, and say Kadri.
Yeah, they have Kadri, Pospisil, and Kuzmenko. Kadri's, I just can't get it. I've been so impressed. Like, through all of this, there's been two unbelievable professionals. One of them has been Nazem Kadri. The other's been Jacob Markstrom. I think that they have both been really good for the Flames this year.
Yeah, I agree. And, again, guys like that, you need to give those kind of guys. I mean, nobody expected Martin Pospisil to be a full-time NHLer this year, much less a top 6 forward. So you need to give guys that chance, I think, going down the stretch, whether that's Dryden Hunt, AJ Greer, Kuzmenko, the time to say, we're going to give you the opportunity. As Daryl used to say, when the opportunity comes, make the most of it.
Yeah. Now, what did you think about, what do you think of Pelche with the Wranglers now? Do you want to see him there, or do you think it would have been better to have him up here with the Flames?
No, that's the right place for him, I think. He wasn't looking great. I think after his shoulder injury, he needs a little bit of time to play. And I think Pelche, if you're looking for him to be a top 6 guy in his career, I think send him down there and let him be that. I don't know that putting him on the 3rd, 4th line was the best place for him.
Yeah, and that's, especially with a shoulder injury, that's tough minutes. Those are not easy minutes to play. Those are usually.
It seemed like he wasn't as confident, and I think sending him to the American League to get his confidence back is probably the best thing for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still kind of critical of Matt Coronado, too, and you and I have talked about this. I thought that the best place for Coronado this year was the American League. They brought him up. They brought him up right now. He's looking okay, but I think he needs to be sent back down sooner rather than later as well to play top minutes.
Yeah, and with the Wranglers too, I think that there would be some real value in having a Calgary Wranglers lengthy playoff run. I mean, when I watch AHL games or AHL highlights at the Saddle Dome, I'm seeing a lot of empty seats, and I want to see that building filled up with Wrangler fans. And I think getting a good playoff run and getting Coronado ready in that would be great. Like, I know that the people are not fans of Kevin Rooney and Dryden Hunt, but my pushback to that is, like, there's no need. The summer playing, there's no need to play them because of the future. They have worked. Kevin Rooney has worked. Both Rooney and Hunt have worked really hard. That I think it's
for those. And I've heard the same criticism. And I say, if you don't like Rooney and Hunt, who would you rather have on the 4th line? For the place they are in the lineup, they're fine. You're not looking for Rooney to be your number 1C.
Yeah, but I'm not comfortable with the guy that has put in that kind of effort that bench him because we're looking for the young guy. I don't think that that's sending the right message either. I think you got to balance the merit with the growth, right? Like, just because you're a young player, I don't think you're entitled to play in the NHL. That's my one pushback. And
if you want to bench a guy, bench Kuzmenko over Rooney or Hunt. They're putting in the effort. I would say at some points of the season, bench Huberdeau. Like, there's guys, bench Mangiapane. Like, there's guys who are not putting in the effort who I think should come out of lineup if you do want to test a young player.
Yeah. There has to be some earn, and there has to be some. Yeah, you got to establish that sort of what is the Flames' identity, or what are we expecting going forward, right?
A couple seasons ago, they had a big banner in their dressing room that said, always earned and never given. And I think they still need to follow that mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing, just to go back to the top 10 argument, that is the danger when you're with a guy that high, is there's some players have that sense of entitlement when I was picked that high. I am going to be a star, and I'm not going to listen to you.
And we're talking about stars. We were talking about some earlier. Dustin Wolf was drafted in the 7th round.
Yeah. And you know what is great about that too? Not necessarily being drafted in the 7th round or being picked a little later. You're open to feedback. You're open to saying okay, I've got a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't picked as high. I've got something to prove to get into the National Hockey League. There is something to be said for for some bitter roots and chips on shoulders.
When we talked to Theo Fleury on our show a couple of years ago, he sort of mentioned that a lot of these guys who are picking the top 10 are picked because they do their thing, and coaches don't tell them to change. Just you go do your thing, kid. Everyone else will adapt to it, And yeah, I think that they're not always open to change or feedback. And they're used to being the top guy in their small town and being, the talk of the town and all that. And going from being the talk of the town in St. Albert to being the talk of the town in Calgary is very different, or Chicago, or, New York City. So yeah, I think you're right. A lot of these guys that come in later, they're used to fighting. They're used to taking coaching. They're used to adapting to a new scenario. And a lot of times I think they have a better success rate coming in and working their way up.
Yeah, and the guys that are in the top 10 that are successful are because they're willing to be coached or willing to put the time in the off season to get their game better. That is, you want players that love to play the game of hockey.
Yep.
I
would say not just play the game of hockey, but play as a team, because we see some of these guys who, I'm just going to go do my show. You guys find a way to do it. I love doing what I do.
Yeah, that is another battle that you're going through as well. And, that's important too, right? Like getting that, having that team first mentality is also important. And, there's just, it's so much more than just, I'll pick in the top 10 and this guy will be great and we'll live happily ever after. There's so much to it and how you build the team. I'm more of a fan of how you build the team around it than, okay, we'll build around this guy. Like, I mean, yes, you do need elite talent, but you need to find a way to build a team too.
For sure.
What was I going to say? I forgot I was going to say something. And I forgot. Oh,
go ahead.
Back to 2004, and I know that you'll touch on this on your podcast, but one thing to remember about that 2004 team, and for those that are coming into this new rebuild in Flames land, the Flames went through the Young Guns rebuild, and that Young Guns rebuild almost sent the Flames out of Calgary. There was a Save Our Flames ticket campaign that happened just before the year that they went to the Cup final. So, there are some fans that have already went through this. And, for us that are a little bit older, for you younger fans, I think that everything is going to be okay. I highly recommend that you start listening to the older fans that have already been through what we're seeing right now and have that warning torch in front of you. Because
you're saying that Rico Fata and Daniil Tkachuk were not good picks?
Exactly. Yes. I mean, yes, Matthew Tkachuk worked out, but Daniil. Brent Cron turned out to be a great analyst, but
I mean, a very different time in the National Hockey League. I'll give you that. No salary cap. Calgary couldn't compete for salaries. That's why we saw two Canadian teams leave as well. But you're right. We've been down this road before, and the Flames are one of the few teams that's never been really bad. Like the highest they picked is fourth. Even in those bad years, they were not really bad teams. And I think that says a lot here, but do we want to be on the verge of leaving again? And, I think the Flames are putting a lot of money into a new building. They need to make sure money's coming in, and they got to make sure they're doing this. And I think they need to be ready for 2027, 2028 with the new building, or there's going to be a big hole in Murray Edwards' pocket there.
Yeah. And I think there's cautionary tales in both Winnipeg and Ottawa that I think is leaving like the Flames ownerships in pause. I mean, Winnipeg has generally been pretty good this year, but they still have had empty crowds. And Ottawa, I think, has had a couple of years ago in a playoff run had empty seats. So, you
mentioned Buffalo, right? A team that's perpetually rebuilding. Like, I think you got to make money, and especially when there's the Wranglers, the Hitmen, and the Flames in this market. If the Flames suck, people are going to spend their money on the Wranglers. So in some ways, the Flames don't care because they're getting all that revenue. But you got to pay all these guys, and they need to at least put out good enough hockey people want to come see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they need to have enough HL talent that people want to pay to see that. And I think there's a lot of business pieces that go into this as well.
Yeah. It's not as easy as it is on Twitter to run a hockey team.
It's not like playing NHL, 2004 on your Xbox where you can just trade for whoever you want and dump guys and it doesn't matter. there's a lot of, people and there's a lot of money behind this team, and you've got to find a way to do that. And like you said, Kev, I think that, okay, so we tank, we get Celebrini. Let's just say we're not going to be number one, but let's say you get another guy in the top 10. It could be good or it could be bad, and it could have been a waste of a season.
Yeah.
I think there's one good player in this draft, and that's Celebrini. And then the rest are okay. I don't think you're going to build a franchise around the next 5-6 guys.
Okay. Do we want to start going? Let's go here, because the name Tisha Ginla is coming up. There's a lot of people that want that connection with the Flames. Look, if he's the best player available at the time that you pick, if you think that's it, I think that it's hard not to argue against that. But boy, there is a lot of, I'm not saying there's Tisha Ginla red flags. There is a lot of pressure. That's an example of a guy that's going to have a hell of a lot of pressure with his dad in the rafters, not only in the rafters of the organization, in the actual organization, in a high position whether that's assistant general manager, whether that's in head coach with Calgary, with the Wranglers, or whatever he is doing. He is the son of the face of the franchise. That is enormous pressure that could either make you grow or crush you.
Yeah, and even if he becomes, let's say, an AHL player, it's not like he's banished to Stockton. Even if you're playing in the AHL here in that building with dad's number above you, there's still huge pressure at every level there.
Yeah.
If this team was in St. John or Stockton or something, you could say, you know what, he's going to get away from the pressure. You can't with the American League team here unless you banish him to Rapid City.
Yeah, and the media requests that are going to be on him if and when he gets drafted in Calgary, it's going to be enormous.
I think the best thing for the Flames to do, like you said, if he's the best player available, I don't know that by, let's say, pick 11, which is maybe where the Flames are picking, that there is a best guy. I think I would probably pass on him either way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the right time. I mean, maybe he comes here later. Maybe you go get Joe, his little brother, in a couple of years. But I think right now you're going to do more harm than good developing this guy in Calgary.
Yeah. One way that it might work, or it could be beneficial for him, is like you're just saying, okay, look, we've drafted Tisha Ginla. He's not playing here for a couple of years. We are protecting him from the media. We are giving him all of the time to actually develop into the hockey player that he's going to be. You need to, and I think the media, I think the Calgary media in general would actually agree with this. They would ignore him, and give him the time to develop. And then when he's 2021, okay, now we'll give media requests at this point. You can talk to him. But you got to keep him find a way to make sure that you keep him out of the spotlight for at least.
Yes and no. I mean, he'll be here every summer for rookie camp. They'll talk to him then. He's playing in Kelowna. He's not that far away. And even outside of our media, I mean, what are teammates going to say when he's playing in the American League or he's coming up to rookie camp and, wow, you don't skate like your old man? I think it's going to be tough to get away from.
Yeah, but
even a rookie camp, Dad is sitting right next to Conroy in the stands. If he gets an extra shift or whatever, is it going to be seen by other guys as nepotism?
Yeah, and that's the other problem with that. And when you're in a competing position, that's kudos to Jack Doan for getting his first goal of the year or first ever goal. But Shane Doan is not in that organization right now. He's with the Toronto.
No, he's not. And I mean, even Trelivy made a comment, right? I mean, Doan's with Toronto, and Trelivy made a comment that we'll let him go for the first, but then we need him back.
Yeah.
And while Jerome is right now just an advisor, who knows where he'll be in 2-3 years? I could see Jerome being part of this coaching staff.
Yeah.
I think it's fun, and it gives the Flames something to sort of fans to cling on to, the second coming of Kiprusoff, or the second coming of Jerome, or the second coming of anybody. You want to draft the Legends kid, Lanny McDonald's kid or whatever, but I don't know it's the best for him. I think he will forever be in Dad's shadow. I think you'd almost have to be harder on him than anybody else. Maybe he's the last guy to be called up because you don't want it to look like nepotism. And then you're hurting his development in some ways too. Yeah.
Ultimately, the best thing for him is to not be drafted by the Flames, I think. I think he would blossom more. But yeah.
I also don't know if the Flames need a center winger right now. Like if I'm using that high pick, I think the Flames need to be taking a defenseman.
I don't know. I still think they could use some offensive talent up the middle. I don't think.
But remember, this isn't going to be a guy here next year.
No, but you're not going to get a defenseman next year. The defenseman's not going to play here next year either.
No, but I think you've got Poirier who's close a couple of years from now. I think that after him, there's nothing in the cupboards. I mean, you got Burzhnevich and maybe Yermo. I think that's the cupboard you've got to restock.
The right side of the defense, yes. The left side, I think, might be okay. I do think they need one more. It depends on where you're at with Etienne Morin.
And Carter Yakimchuk is there. He'll probably go about 10th to 12th. He plays for the Hitmen. I think there's a story there to draft the Hitmen guy as well.
Okay, but you talk about that Brett Cron draft. Everyone wanted Brett Cron, and Lanny McDonald was the one that went up and picked Brett Cron, and everybody's like, this is the Hitman Flame story, and that didn't work out either.
Yeah, but again, we've said, I think at that point, by 10, 11, 12, you got a 50% chance. Whether we take the Hitman guy or not, whoever they take there. I mean, we don't even know Tej is going to work out. Tej could be a big bust.
Yeah, there's just no guarantee for sure. I mean, people were so.
I mean, and I think TJ has more of a chance of being a bust in Calgary because of the expectations.
Yeah, I mean, even I don't want to go down the Jake Virtanen road too much, but that was a guy that had some really high expectations that people were high on in Vancouver, and that didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I'm not saying TJ Ginla should never be a Flame. I don't know the Flames should draft him. I would rather see him go a place like St. Louis, where Jerome McGinley has no influence. He could go, he could play, he could develop. And maybe when he's, 26 and he's entering the UFA market, he says, yeah, I'll come to Calgary then.
Yeah. At the point where a similar situation where Matthew and Bray are a bit more comfortable under their skin and are kind of a bit more of a personality would be the
and
time.
You know what you're getting then too.
Yeah. At 18, he is known as son because he's as young as a son, right?
Yeah, I would say go somewhere like, Philly, go somewhere like, St. Louis, go somewhere like Washington where you can develop and nobody cares about the Iginla name there. Not Boston where he played for a bit, but go somewhere where nobody cares about the Iginla name, develop. And later on, I mean, if he wants to come here, great. We'll bring him in when we know what he is in his mid-20s or even, early 30s.
Yeah.
I mean, I even look at a guy like Brett Hull, right? When Brett Hull went to Arizona, and they pulled Dad's number down. And I mean, Brett Hull was a known commodity, but I think that was even hard for him after his best years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when he was with he didn't have a hard time, but there were expectations on Brett Hull. He turned out to be one of the best goal scorers in the game. So please don't get me wrong when I'm saying that Brett Hull didn't meet expectations, but there were some pretty high expectations on him. And I mean, there was a super talent, and it's a fascinating debate because you literally traded a Stanley Cup for Brett Hull. That ultimately was what happened there. But
yeah, and I mean, he didn't play in the same market as Dad, but I think that's the closest comparison I could look at is what was expected from Hull because of Dad. And, it wasn't until that last year that he was in Phoenix, which used to be the old Winnipeg franchise. So they have the same continuity. Remember, they did the whole thing of pulling Bobby's number out so Brett could wear it. And yeah, I think we all knew Brett was past his prime then, but I think it gave the wrong end to his career. He played 5 games, got 1 point that year. I mean, he got hurt. It wasn't great, but he just, I don't know. I think it sullied some of his legacy of being his own guy versus I'm here to, to be Bobby's kid.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Mark Johnson never played with Bob Johnson.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, if I was TJ Ginla, I would have almost entered the draft or, kind of grown up using mom's maiden name, whatever that is, and get out of the Ginla shadow.
Yeah.
See if you can do it on your own.
I think the one player that I'm really going to be intrigued by, of course, you talked about the PWHL. It'd be really interesting to see what happens with Jada Gimla when she enters the PWHL, because like she's going to be a star. I think that she has the looks of being a star, and she won't have the pressure of she'll have the Iginla name, but I don't think she's going to live under the shadow of being Jerome's kid. I think.
Well, and again, different teams, right? It's not like Jerome ever played in the PWHL, so there's a different expectation.
Yeah.
And there's another Iginla kid. I mean, Joe's a couple of years away. Maybe you don't take Tej, and maybe by then they have a better sense of who they are, and they take Joe. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's the best idea to take the kid of somebody in your organization who you're projecting to go that high. If it was like the 4th round, I mean, Daryl took his kid in like the 4th round, and I think that's a lot different.
That's true. Yeah, it is, because there's less pressure, and you don't have the pictures. First round pick of the son of, it is. I'm not saying the guy can't get through it. It's just it's a hard pressure to get into.
If Tej was going in the second, I mean, even we talked about Doan earlier. Josh Doan was a 2nd round pick, right? Getting rid of some of that pressure. If they could take Tej in the 2nd, 3rd round, I'd say great. But I don't know that the expectations you want in this guy are coming in as being that 1st round pick.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's certainly it's going to be a fascinating discussion. I haven't really dug into the draft stuff as much yet. So, I mean, I know some of the players, but I'm going to, wait. Well, I guess we'll wait. And I'm kind of waiting until the end of the year, to have a look. But, what a lot of people are saying this draft, it's top 10, top 20 heavy. And after that, we're not sure. So.
And there's a lot of guys in this, and I would encourage fans. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are playing now. The Kachucks is an example who are better than their dads. I mean, I think we can say that both the Kachucks have, are probably better than their father. And their father was a very different type of player. A guy like Tyson Barrie better than his father. But none of these guys, Sam Reinhart, but none of these guys had dads that were as important to that organization. And even with Matthew. I think if Matthew would have gone somewhere where Keith played, it would have not been good either.
Yeah, if he ended up in St. Louis, it probably would have been a much different story. But he's got
it would have been very different. And I think being in Calgary let him develop, because the Tkachuk name doesn't mean anything here.
Yeah, even, like you look at William as an example. William he was a talent, but he wasn't an instant star that he was now, right? It's a bit, but the one thing with Matthew is he does have the cockiness behind him to make it probably would have had a better chance to work with than a lot of other players, because he just has that like he's probably the closest to what the current character of the Rock is. He just has that arrogance about him to allow it to work. And even back in when he was 18 in draft, he had that swagger about him that it would have worked.
And, I think another guy, look at Max Domi and Ty Domi, right? I think Max has had more chance to develop coming through Arizona, Chicago, than he would have if he was in Toronto.
Quinn, Luke, and Jack.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah. So,
I think that if he, and so I bring these up as examples because I think that sometimes being away from dad's spotlight is more important. I mean, it's funny to watch, Louis DeBrusk interview Jake DeBrusk. Louis was not an all-star either.
No. And yeah, he's making his son do push-ups if he doesn't score points. So.
Yeah. And so, I bring all these up to say that I'm not saying that Tej can't be a great NHLer. I don't know if he will reach his potential in Calgary. And I think it'll be harder for him to reach his potential in Calgary.
I don't disagree with you.
I'm not saying he'll never be a Flame. I just don't know that signing him now or drafting him now is the best thing to do.
No. Is there anything else we need to discuss with the Flames?
I think that's about it.
I didn't bring any other NHL to the forefront because I thought that we would have a pretty lengthy conversation about the Flames, and I don't want to get into the Andrew Berkshire, Zach Hyman thing. I just think it's a pretty obviously dumb video that he went Venn diagram on. I just, I don't really think that is not. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Good. I just want to say congratulations to both Zach Hyman and Sam Reinhart for achieving 50 goals, which is an achievement in the National Hockey League, no matter how many assists that you get, and good for both of them. That's what I will say. Congratulations to both Zach Hyman and Sam Reinhart.
The only other NHL story I'm finding kind of interesting right now is waiting for this land auction in Arizona. And what does that mean for next year?
Yeah.
The NHL had a chance to definitively say, we'll be back in Arizona next year. They didn't. But yet they've said that if this auction doesn't go ahead in June, that it might be too late to move them. So, like, I don't know what you do. I could see, honestly, next year that there's still the Arizona Coyotes playing somewhere else for a year just to test the waters. Remember when the Saddledome flooded and there was talk of having the Flames play out of Saskatoon for a bit?
Right. You know what? I understand the love that the Bettman and Daly have for Arizona. I get it. I get a lot of the reasoning behind it. And, hearing Elliot Freeman say, look, it's not the fans per se, and that, there's hockey development happening, and that's all true. But I really think it's time for Gary Bettman and Bill Daly to speak what I think a lot of owners and a lot of players are saying. It's time for this situation to smarten up. And I think there needs to be some anger here. I think that they've held a lot. I think they're angry about the situation, and I think that they need to kind of just say, look, get this shit together.
Mm-hmm. And from a player perspective too, remember the players get a share of league revenue. So if they don't have enough seats to sell, the players are getting shortchanged because of that too.
Yeah. And
I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get dealt with, if it becomes a CBA issue at some point.
Yeah, and I think, and sure, Marty Walsh has already spoken out about this and said, Marty Walsh has spoken out about Arizona and said this is unattainable, and this is and they've already kind of this. It's very interesting. The other side of that too with the NHLPA is they've been, they held a couple of appeals earlier this year in terms of suspensions and stuff. We saw that with Rasmus Andersson as an example. The other thing that I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Marty Walsh and lawyers kind of figure out if there's a grievance to be held here against Arizona and these conditions.
Even if they do decide that this is feasible, we know you're not going to put up an arena in a month or 3 months over the summer. Like, I could see this even being, let's move the team, say, to Salt Lake. If you get an agreement, we'll move them back, or we'll look at expanding back there. But right now, this market doesn't work.
Yeah, they have to. I think that that's ultimately what they have to do. They just don't want to say it.
Yeah, I think at some point you have to say, we're going to move the team to Salt Lake. If it's viable there, we'll keep them there, and you can get a new expansion franchise when your building's ready. If it's not viable, we'll just keep them there.
Yeah. Yeah,
last time I was on, we talked about expansion. I could totally see that being the way it works. Almost like when Colorado, the Rockies lost them and then became the Avalanche. I could see Arizona losing the team and then expanding back in 5 years when they have a building.
Yeah, I think we talked about this. I said I think it's Houston next, and I think it's either Houston or Salt Lake will get the Arizona team. The loser will get the expansion team, and Arizona's going to get an expansion team, and then we have to figure out what happens east.
Yeah. So I'm anxious to see what happens there, because I think we've got to the point where Arizona is not working, and not say it couldn't work, but they've tried every permutation of everything they can. I think it's time to move on.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing that nobody talks about with Arizona, because we keep talking about this with tax-free states, which Vegas and Florida are, and a lot of teams are coming through. Arizona is a tax-free state. And there would be a lot of players that would want to play in Arizona, but they don't want to play in an arena that is smaller than the Richmond Olympic Oval across the street from me here.
Exactly. Yep. And again, I mean, if you want to keep the market warm, move an American League team there.
Honestly, like if it was me as commissioner, I understand that market, but I would give a 10-year run for an AHL team before I bring the NHL back. Like, I know I don't want to blame the fans for the situation, but they need to prove that they're an NHL market to me. And it's like, one of the things that the NHL has struggled with is they keep finding they're chasing markets as opposed to NFL, NBA, and MLB to an extent. States are coming to them. I feel like the NHL has been chasing places.
Yeah.
And
And
I
remember,
think
I mean, even back in the 90s, they would play some exhibition games in Vegas and stuff like that. I mean, maybe this becomes sort of a special event market until you figure out if it's viable. I could see doing a set of, exhibition games there or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the way that would work. And, it's a great market, no question about it. But like, look, Buffalo hasn't. Let's go back to Buffalo. 13 years, 14 years without a playoff team. They're still filling that building, right? There's never been a threat for the Buffalo Sabres to leave. There's never been an arena issue. They have been able to be a stable market in spite of the lack of success. Arizona has been a mess on and off the ice.
I mean, even look at the Islanders. They played in that terrible Barclays Center, and they were still able to sell a good number of tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I don't understand the coddling I understand that this is the market that you want in Arizona, but it's been too much of a coddle in a lot of ways. And I don't think it's not helping the NHL.
No, it's not. And in some ways, I think it's making them look silly, especially when we're seeing, I think, in the MLB, a team like the A's moving on to bigger and better. I think this is almost making the NHL look, as a lot of people in the States have said about the NHL, it makes them look like the fourth pro league. When they do stuff like this, they look like amateurs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and yes, the MLB league, you saw, if you're watching Toronto, Tampa, the top of the roof in Tampa is closed off. I get it. It does, like, the MLB has their issues with Tampa and that situation, sure, but they don't have a 1,400 mullet arena situation. They're not playing in
Burns Stadium.
Exactly. Or Nat Bailey Stadium here in Vancouver. Yep. So,
and I look at the excitement when the NHL moved to Vegas. And yes, I get it's a big city, big tourist city. If I were the NHL, I'd want to start building that now in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
I think if they move, Salt Lake is where they move to. But let's say Salt Lake or Houston. I think as soon as the season's over, because you don't want people to stop going for the rest of the season. I think as soon as the season's over, you want to build all summer. The NHL's coming. Right? I think you want that team maybe to go and make a big signing in the summer to entice people. Sort of like when, Marc-Andre Fleury came to Vegas and they had that name. I think the Arizona team's on an upswing. That's good for those guys. But I think you want to start building that as opposed to sort of a last minute move in the middle of the night.
Do you think they know what they're going to do and they don't want to say it? Do you think they're going to move it? Do you think they know they're going to move it?
I think they're not going to say anything until the season's over. You're not going to say mid-season, oh, by the way, we're not going to be here. Nobody's going to show up. Corporate sponsors are going to die. I think you need to wait till the end of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, even look at when Atlanta threw in the keys and said move it, they had enough time for the Winnipeg people to be excited.
Yeah.
They didn't even have a name, right? They didn't know they were going to be the Jets. They drafted with no jersey that year because they had no idea what they were going to do. I think you got to wait till the end of the season. You can't announce it now. I think they know what they're going to do. I think the land auction might change their future, but I don't think the land auction changes anything now.
Well, again, it's in June. There's no guarantees. It's just like,
yeah. And if I was the owner in Salt Lake or in Houston, I would want to, be able to immediately show off what my team's name is going to be, whether I'm the Coyotes, something different. I have a feeling logos, jerseys, that sort of thing are going to be made because remember when Vegas came in and when Winnipeg came in, there was no jersey to sell. Like they didn't know what they were going to look like. They drafted with just white NHL jerseys. If I was that guy, if I know now, I want to have some ready for the draft. And so I bet a lot of that work's being done in secret already.
Yeah. I think that they've been. It was no coincidence a couple years ago that Marek and Friedman interviewed Ryan Smith during the Stanley Cup final last year. I don't think that was a coincidence at all. I think that
No,
they've
and-
been thinking about Salt Lake City for some time. And
Yeah, and the fact that he put out a letter right around the time all the Hockey Canada stuff came out this year, I don't think was a coincidence either. I think the league was trying to sort of soften that blow. I think that Houston's going to be the next expansion market. I think Salt Lake's going to be the next relocation market.
I agree with you. I think Houston takes the expansion money. We had the debate. Sean asked, would you have, and I think we had this discussion, would you take the Arizona Coyotes situation or would you take an expansion team?
The big question to me is how much the relocation fee is. Right? If I'm paying about the same, I'd almost rather start new. If I'm paying like half, yeah, I'll take that team. If I'm saving that much money and build on top of it. I mean, we saw Winnipeg take a very lousy Atlanta team and turn around in a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get the right hockey person in there.
I think you got to get the right hockey person. I think it depends on what the fees are both ways. Am I going to spend $1 billion taking that team? No. But if it's, half price, maybe.
The Coyotes have some good pieces in terms of Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller, Matthias Michelli.
I think now of all years, I think now is the year I'd be more open to taking that team. I think they're on the upswing.
They are, it's taken, and I think with a guy like Ryan Smith, you can see that they will be aggressive in free agency to fix.
Yeah, and I think if Ryan Smith comes out, I think he announces a new GM, maybe even a new head coach right away. You put new people in, sort of like when Winnipeg moved in and they put in a brand new GM moving to Winnipeg, right? I think you put in new hockey people there. I don't think you can use the Kachina logo and stuff in Salt Lake. It doesn't make sense. So even if you want to stay as the Coyotes, I think there's going to be a little bit of a rebrand there.
Yeah. The only thing that makes me wonder, and I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but does the alcohol situation in Salt Lake City cause a bit of a pause for players to go?
You're thinking players are going to want to be able to drink?
Well, players do drink.
Sure, but how often are you on the road?
Half and half. I guess, you'll get your libations elsewhere, and Salt Lake you won't. Is it? It's not alcohol free in Salt Lake City. I'm sure you can drink something.
I don't think it is. And even if it is, I mean, so live outside the city, live in Cochrane, right? Go drink there. Like, I don't know the whole deal there, but I would imagine that there's ways you get around it.
Yeah. I got to be honest, I've never been to Salt Lake City, so I have no idea. But I mean, I remember, I'm just looking back to the 2000 Olympics where, remember, the alcohol situation was not great. And the Olympia athletes had some comments about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just doing a quick Google search here as you mentioned it because I've never been there either. And visitsaltlake.com says bars may serve all types of alcohol from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m. So
that's not bad.
I don't see any issue there. I mean, if nothing else, I'm sure there's a way you get around it. Hey, there's a bar at the arena. We went over there and got it from that bar. Like, I don't see it being a big issue.
Yeah, and I just want to check one other thing. Is Utah?
Salt Lake has a couple breweries there, so I don't think it's going to be an issue.
I want to check one other thing. Hang on here. This is a good podcast. Is Utah tax-free state?
I think, and if that was going to be an issue, I don't think it would have been, it would be so far down the discussion phase if that was going to be an issue.
Yeah, and they've had,
Kevin, I mean, sort of on the other side of that, right? I think part of Vegas's advantage the first year was teams went in and overindulged. I think a lot of teams went to Vegas, stayed out late, partied, that sort of thing. I really think that was part of the reason Vegas had such a good first year, and teams have learned how to manage that.
Yeah, they can manage around that. Yeah, I think
a lot of teams now stay outside of Vegas proper and, way off the strip and that sort of thing. Like, I think, you'll find a way to get around it. Like I said, there's going to be ways to get around it. So, okay, I won't live in Salt Lake proper if that's the issue. And, I can drink then. I don't need a drink for the 4 hours I'm at the rink. Nobody's doing that anyways. Nobody's walking around the dome with an open beer on practice day.
No, I think, just in terms of, I'm not a big drinker during hockey games anyway. So I don't drink anyway, but
and if you're an away team and you want that, I mean, we'll drink on the plane then. Like, you know, I don't think it's that big of an issue.
Yeah. I don't either, but I just was I had to ask, like, the alcohol situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about Salt Lake to know about this alcohol situation, but the little bit I just researched, it sounds like it wouldn't be an issue.
No. Okay. Yeah, that is one of the stories to look forward to in the off season is what happens with Arizona, and where we're going there. I think is absolutely going to be fascinating to look at. And the other thing, though, one other thing with the whole, if you take the Arizona team, the expansion situation that will happen, I don't think the general managers are going to fall for what happened in Vegas. I think that they've learned a hell of a lot of lessons. You're not getting a line from I do agree with Sean. You will not get a line from the Florida Panthers to start building your franchise. General managers will be a hell of a lot smarter than they were with the Vegas Golden Knights.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
All
you
right.
know, I mean, like the Flames, it's going to take a few years, right? You're not going to move to Salt Lake and become a playoff team right away or win the Stanley Cup right away. It's going to take a few years. And once people see, wow, this is legitimate, you might get a line 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah, you can build that, right? Yeah, you can build something there, and you'll have players that will connect there, and you've got, you've already developed a pretty good hockey. You're developing hockey players in Arizona. What's to say that Utah doesn't have that? Yeah, I think that there's I think I'm with you. It's ultimately it's time for Arizona to move. I'm on the move Arizona train. I think it's just better for the league.
Yep. Even if for Friends fans out there, even if we, like Ross and Rachel, just take a break, if they're on a break for a little bit until we figure out the future, but I don't think they can continue to play in Mullet Arena.
Okay, question though. If Salt Lake City wins the Stanley Cup or make a playoff, does Arizona say, we were on a break?
Sure. No one's going to hear them.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? If there's no NHL team there, they can yell whatever they want. I mean, there's Quebec City fans yelling too, and the league's not hearing them.
Yeah.
I'm sure Quebec City said the same thing after Colorado won.
Oh, yeah, and probably in larger swear words too. Can you imagine if Atlanta or Winnipeg wins a cup? Well, I mean, I think they're going back to Atlanta anyway. I think that is a foregone conclusion at some point.
Yeah, but I think there's too much time passing now between Winnipeg and Atlanta. It was pretty quick after Quebec City moved that Colorado was successful.
Yeah, I remember when the Sonics moved to Oklahoma, and there are still a lot of Seattle people that are they will not cheer for the Oklahoma Thunder. They will just screw it. Yeah.
And you know what the good thing is? There's not a lot of people cheering for the Coyotes already anyways.
Yeah. I would be curious to know. I would be curious to go. That would be a fun little trip to figure out, if Arizona's back, where is that hockey community that everybody's talking about? I would be curious to find it. Just would be good exploration to find.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the market. I mean, I don't know what their junior hockey looks like or anything like that.
Yeah. Anything else we need to talk about?
I think that's it.
Okay, so I think you should talk about what you're going to talk about on your show tomorrow.
Sure. So we have something different that we're doing. We're not going to let everybody know what it is yet, but tune into our show. It's going to sound different this week. But as always, you can find us on firesidechat.ca, anywhere you find podcasts, social media, anywhere. I guess not Google Podcasts anymore. I'm seeing that here, but Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you find podcasts, we'll be there. And like I said, we'll be talking Flames. We're going to be doing something a little bit different this week. We're not going to say what it is yet. We'll see how long it takes fans to figure it out, but we'll be doing something a little bit different. We hope you'll join us for that ride.
All right, and we will be talking Canucks this week at some point, probably not tomorrow afternoon. The Canucks are playing the Ducks of Anaheim, the former Mighty Ducks. They're not mighty anymore. in name or in current team, but hopefully the Canucks are clinching a playoff spot here soon. Not that they're in any panic of not missing the playoffs, but concerns about first place and concerns really just to tease about the power play and the offense of Vancouver. I think we'll be breaking that down at some point this week. So stay tuned to, we'll pop that up. So stay tuned for that. You can follow Sean Beardy, Canuck03, Tyler TNOBLE. I'm sure we'll be talking some officiating. Christian Schneid, CSHNEIDZ. Devin is out and about sales traveling, so he's coming back soon. Gord Howe 09. I am KEVOLE. Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you get fine podcasts as well. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.